If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Hey there, welcome to episode 109 of the Leading Learning Podcast. In this episode, we're going to focus on one of our favorite topics, marketing. Specifically, we're going to look at some of the practices of internet marketers and how they might apply to your learning business. Before we do that, though, we want to highlight a resource, and we also want to acknowledge the founding sponsors for a new initiative we have underway.
That's right. We are very close to helping the folks at 100 Reviews, Ben Martin and Terry Carden, launch a new learning management system review site that's built on the same model as their very successful Review My AMS, in that case AMS meaning Association Management System. And they've already got a very successful Association Management System review site. We'll be providing more details about the Review My LMS site in the coming weeks, but for now, we want to acknowledge the 4 companies that have stepped up to help get it off the ground and really to help create what we think is a very transparent space in which LMS users can review the systems they are using so that other organizations who are looking for an LMS have access to that information as part of their decision process. And we feel like this has been a gap in the association and broader learning business market for a long time. So we're really excited to know that it's soon going to be filled with support from the following companies. And those are Community Brands, Digitel, Next Thought, and Web Courseworks. And we'll link to each of those companies from the show notes for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 109. So if you're looking for an LMS, we really encourage you to visit these companies and see what they have to offer.
We also encourage you to grab the resource that we want to highlight for this episode. It's a document that we published recently titled 10 Realistic, Cost-Effective Ways to Grow and Improve Your Learning Business. And it is just what it sounds like, 10 ways that, based on our long experience, you can move the dial on your learning business without spending a lot of money or having to do backflips to find resources. So you can sign up to access the 10 ways by going to the show notes for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 109. Or if you're subscribed by iTunes or another podcasting service, you will see the download link right there in the information or notes area. That's just one of the many benefits of being a subscriber.
And there are many benefits indeed. So definitely consider subscribing when you get over to those show notes as well. So speaking of subscribing, speaking of internet, websites, downloadable resources, we're going to focus in on the whole concept of internet marketing and specifically internet marketers and what they do, or at least what the really successful ones do to be successful. And we should probably clarify up front here what we mean when we say internet marketer. You know, we're not talking about just any old company or person who markets things online. In that sense, we're probably all internet marketers in one way or another. But this really applies specifically to entrepreneurs who make their living, and in some cases make a fortune, really, primarily through marketing and selling effectively online. So, some examples of these types of people are Jeff Walker would be a big one, famous for his product launch series. Brendan Bouchard, the guys over at Internet Business Mastery, Ryan Dice. These are some of the people that we're talking about. And, many internet marketers sell only digital products. That's all they do. Not all of them, but many of them do sell physical products and events and things like that. But digital products are big. Many of them have, no physical store or offices. They may not even have products of their own. They may be doing affiliate marketing to generate sales from other people's products. But whatever their specific approach to running their online business is, there really is a core set of rules that we've found over time, just observing these people, because we do carefully observe them day in and day out to see what they're doing. There's really kind of a core set of rules that all of the successful internet marketers follow. And so we're going to go over, we've kind of grouped those into 7 areas, 7 rules, and we're going to share those 7 rules in this episode.
And so the first rule is value first. And I know if you've been listening to our podcast or been following what we do at Tagoras, you know how we like to harp on value, because really, you're not going to be able to sell or market anything effectively if you aren't offering something of value to your customers and your prospective customers. Now, the sort of added trick is that you've got to provide that value before you start charging for additional value. And this is something that internet marketers really get. They really understand that, before people are going to be willing to pay a dime, they need to know that you actually have something of value, that you can actually help them with their problem or help them seize an opportunity. And even before handing over something like an email or other identifying information. So, there's money, but then there's also this other information like an email. And I'd say that it's getting incredibly and increasingly competitive, so that people don't really want to, hand over their email again unless they see that there's something of valuable. So you need practical, actionable types of resources that are freely available, freely in the sense of $0, and also available without having to sign up for anything. And so if you're having any sort of difficulty with your learning business, if your enrollments aren't where you want to see them, if you aren't getting the uptake in any of your, among any of your offerings, what we would encourage you is to look at value. Are you actually offering something of value? And what can you offer that helps lead people logically to sign up for that course, to make that enrollment purchase, to sign up for your conference? What is it that you can do in terms of maybe brief videos or PDFs with a checklist or a variety of things? What can you do to provide some value so that people can begin to see what you know and what you can help them with?
And this is really the momentum area of the value ramp for folks that are familiar with our value ramp, and we'll link to the value ramp in the show notes so that you can see this. But this is, providing those resources up front. Again, as you were saying, Celisa, you're not necessarily asking for an email address initially. It's a blog post. It's a podcast episode like this one happens to be. But attracting people to you because you're providing that value. Then you may move to accepting or getting people to give you their emails. And then eventually, obviously, as the value escalates, you're going to move into charging for it and charging them more and more. But really thinking in terms of providing significant value up front so you can start that momentum and then take them up the value ramp. So value first, definitely, and we're all about that here at Tagoras. So number 2 is going to be that the money is in the list. And you will hear this again and again from successful internet marketers. Not that they don't use social media, not that they don't want to have search engine optimization on their website. All of that stuff is important, but they want your name on a list so that they can contact you. And they don't want just any names on their list. They want the right people to have opted in to their list so that they are then able to communicate with them. And email comes in for a lot of criticism these days, or just a lot of worry that, too much email is being sent. Actually, in our 10 ways resource for this episode, we point out that many organizations could probably be sending more email, though they need to have that value component in their emails. The fact is, an email list, a good email list, is still really the number one way to sell, particularly educational products, whether those are online products or their events. We see it again and again with clients. That's where they are getting the most uptake, when they are able to send out a successful email and get the clicks from that. That's when they're going to get a registration. Now, there's a little bit of a twist on this. If you're a membership organization, as many of the folks listening to this episode are, then obviously, you've got your membership list. That's your membership email list. And so you're using that for your marketing purposes. And that's great, but a lot of times organizations don't really kind of cultivate and manage that list in the way they need to, because just because somebody has signed up to be a member for you doesn't mean they're necessarily enthusiastic about what you're doing from an education standpoint. I mean, hopefully they are, at least initially, but really for a membership organization or for any organization that has a large established list, maybe a customer list, whatever, you need to be looking at that over time, tending that list, segmenting that list, really making sure that the people you're communicating want to hear from you. And oftentimes, for an education department, this means, stepping up and trying to, grab a little ground, I guess, in the marketing department and say, hey, we want to make sure that we are doing special offers that make people sort of raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested, so that we can see that, and we can see, that this group of people that we have on our list are people who do want to hear from us about this thing, about this event, about this online course. But, in general, you definitely do not want to leave your list building to chance. You don't want to just rely on a membership list. And if you don't have a membership list, then you want to be very actively doing everything you can to get people to sign up for your list so that you're able to contact them. And then you want to also, cultivate and tend that list over time to make sure you've got the right people on there, people who are interested in hearing from you, and that when you are communicating with them, you're communicating something of value consistently to them so that they're interested in continuing to hear from you, sometimes buy from you, sometimes not, but certainly at least a portion of the time they're going to be buying from you.
So that second step is to have the good email list. The money is in the list, so it's a question of both quantity and quality. You need the right people, and you need as many of them as possible on that list. So the third rule is teaching sells. And so if you're in the learning business, then you're selling education. But the other thing to notice and to realize is that education itself is also a very powerful selling tool. And education-based marketing has been around for a long time, but the internet has really turned into an absolutely essential tool for all types of businesses. And back to that first rule of delivering value, a great way to deliver value is to share useful knowledge with your customers and show them how to apply it. So you're really actually teaching them something. You're giving them a little bit of education. Now, sometimes ironically, I think that organizations that are in the learning business often aren't that great at realizing that they can use teaching and learning to actually sell, and do things like even offering a free demo course and doing things like that could help organizations reach customers who might be interested. Even that level of thing doesn't tend to happen very, very much. Or sometimes if there is free educational content, maybe it's behind the member paywall, which then means you already have to have, the person already has to have agreed to be a member before they can even sort of see that value that you're offering in the form of education.
That's right. And we do find that this really is a perennial issue with organizations. They've got things behind that member paywall. And in many cases, that means even the members aren't necessarily going to be aware of it. But it certainly means that prospective members who you could be getting on a list, you could then be marketing to, both for educational and membership purposes, are not going to be aware of you. They're not going to be able to access that educational value, see what you have to offer, and then become more involved in the organization. So that is the teaching sales aspect of it. And then to kind of stick with that teaching model, I guess the number 4 we would say is that testing teaches. And we're not talking about the kind of test where you sit down with, pen and paper or answer questions on an online form. We're talking about testing out your content and your marketing concepts in general. So, one of the many reasons to put high-value educational content in front of your prospects is that it gives you a chance to test the market. You can see what actually resonates, and you can do this in a low-cost way. So, a blog post or a quick video that's related to content for an event or a course that you plan to launch, you can see, does that get visitors? Does it get people to engage with it and share it? Knowing that, can be really tremendously helpful in deciding whether to develop something or possibly how to develop it, because you'll get good market feedback. And, there are many other ways in which internet marketers test their markets. One of the things that they do routinely is to run what are called A/B split tests on their emails, for example. So they'll send out 2 versions of the same email. Email marketing programs are going to allow you to, split who on your list it gets sent to, and you'll see if, for example, one subject line does better than another, or if one slightly, modified content in one email gets a different response than content in another. So, you really have to be engaging in some level of testing. Even if you don't have the responsibility or the desire to get as technical as doing an A/B test, you need to make sure that there are people in your organization organization who know how to run those sorts of tests, and that you've got access to them, and that they've got your ear, and you're going to be able to get them to do that sort of stuff. If you don't have somebody in your organization, you can also find contractors who can help you with this type of testing work. A resource we often suggest is Upwork. Just go to upwork.com to find contractors there, and you can explain, that you're trying to do an A/B test, or you're trying to test out different types of content, and people are going to know what you're talking about. And the final thing I'd mention in this area is a concept we've talked about many times before, which is just the minimum viable product. We'll link to some posts that we've done on this, but this is the idea that you get a product into the market that meets the essential value that your customers, members are looking for in terms of educational content, and you see what the response to that is before you go and build a full-blown course or an event or anything else. We advocate, for example, using live webinars to pilot the content that you might then put into an on-demand course later, but you don't take the step to fully investing in all of the instructional design and development that would go into the on-demand course. You start out with a webinar with a live audience, get their feedback, and use that to shape things. So all sorts of forms of just testing out your ideas out there, your product ideas, to see what's actually going to work with your market. Internet marketers do this all the time.
Well, and I just want to stress too that these are marketers, and they're really focused on the full picture of marketing, not just the promotion part of it, which I think gets a lot of attention when people do tune into marketing, but also that product aspect of marketing, making sure, like you were just saying, Jeff, that you have that market evidence that people really like what you're offering out there. So you put out that MVP, that minimum viable product, you get the feedback, make sure that it's actually providing value the way you think it's going to.
Yeah, it's fundamental to how they do product strategy.
So the fifth rule is emotion rules. And this is a point that we've made in other places, especially around pricing. And we can point to a resource around that in the show notes as well. But, value is about perception. Your customers, your prospective customers have to perceive value there. And when you think about perception, it's often driven by emotion, not so much logic, but you just kind of go, oh yeah, I like that, or I think that can help me. And it's a much more sort of heart-based versus head-based response to it. And so the really successful internet marketers, they know how to weave their products into a story that really gets that emotional response from the prospective buyer. And so they tend not to focus all that much actually on the products that they're selling, and they tend to focus more on the outcomes. So maybe it's more freedom, maybe it's more self-sufficiency, maybe it's better health, maybe it's less headache managing staff. You begin to get the picture here. And I think we see a lot of organizations that sort of forget this point, and when they talk about a product and an educational offering, and they sit down to do the marketing, the promotion of it, they tend to focus on things like how much credit something offers, or the fact that it's convenient, or that it's timely. And those can be benefits, and I think that people can perceive those as valuable, but they don't tend to have that emotional pull. And they also tend to be the same kinds of things that competitors either are already touting or certainly can start to tout, and so it doesn't leave you in a particularly unique position. And so figuring out that emotional connection, that emotional story you want to make, that can be tough. And I think that's probably why it doesn't happen all that often. But it's really worth the effort to begin to make guesses about what matters to your learners. And so you want to make sure that you're listening to your learners, that you're observing them. This might be an area where you can do things like focus groups and interviews, so that you really are hearing from the horse's mouth, from the learner's mouth, what it is they value, what they would like more of, what isn't helpful to them. And you begin to hear those stories that people are telling about their training and education and experiences, and then that begins to provide you with that fodder that you can really turn into this emotional story that you can put into your marketing.
Now, I will note this is the area where internet marketing can kind of go to the dark side in a way. A lot of people, and unfortunately, rightfully so, do not have a high opinion of internet marketers. They can feel sleazy, manipulative. And it's often when that happens because they're doing the emotion thing poorly. They haven't really understood who they're talking to, and they're trying to tug on people's heartstrings, but haven't really made the connection. And like you said, this is tough. I mean, this is where the good marketers really stand out. That first of all, they're ethical and they are taking the time to really understand who they're talking to and what is meaningful to them, and they take it to heart. And it comes across in how they present themselves out to the marketplace that they're trying to serve. So if you can master the emotional side of the picture, it's really, really powerful. This next one is also very powerful, number 6, and this one is words matter. Yeah, right. Words matter. And we all know that attention is, a really precious resource these days. So, whether a prospect is surfing the web, opening an envelope, checking your inbox, you typically have a matter of seconds, or in many cases, milliseconds, during which she's going to decide whether or not to pay attention to you. So your choice of words in that brief time, that can make the difference between starting a long-term relationship or simply racking up another bounce, as I call it, when somebody comes to your website and then basically leaves immediately because they haven't seen anything that feels like it's going to be of value to them. And then, arguably even more important, once you have a prospect's attention, you need to make it count. You're going to need to convert them because it's very nice to get their attention, but if they don't do anything with that, then it doesn't really matter. So here again, the words you use really count. So how do you convey the value that we talked about in the first point here as rapidly and effectively as possible, and convince the prospect to take action, whether that means actually making a purchase or whether it's simply signing up for an email list, as we talked about in number 2, building your list. So successful internet marketers recognize that they either need to master the skills of great copywriting or they need to hire people who already have mastered those skills. And in many cases, the organizations that we're talking to through this podcast, who we work with, don't necessarily have somebody on staff who's got great copywriting skills. I mean, that's not just a general marketing skill. That's very specific. Somebody who's really trained and has that down to both an art and a science. But you can hire those people. And again, a resource for this type of thing is to go to a site like Upwork.com, where you can find good copywriters. But I'd also say, giving training to your marketing staff, getting training for yourself and how to write effective copy can be extremely powerful. And we'll also recommend a couple of books that we think are great for supporting this and giving you some good examples. And we'll recommend some other sites as well that you can visit for good copywriting advice. And again, you'll be able to find those in the show notes for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 109.
So we are at the 7th and final rule of internet marketing that we're going to offer. It's no process, no business. So if you think about these internet marketers, they're in it for the long haul. They're focused on building a scalable and sustainable business. So they're not just kind of one and done. They want to create something that they can continue to leverage. And so they tend to be masters of efficiency and really look for ways that they're going to help them grow their revenue and profitability without adding a lot of labor. And so they're doing things like, creating these repeatable formulas or nailing down a process that they can reuse or a system that they're going to use to drive new business. And very often they will share all or at least significant parts of these processes and systems. And then that becomes part of how they market themselves. That's part of that value that they're offering out. And I think really importantly, they know that creating content once and then leveraging the heck out of it is really one of the most powerful ways to scale. And so, if you think about something like starting with a video and then you can, edit it down into shorter bits, you can extract the audio, you can create transcripts. And so just with this one kind of capture of the video, you can begin to have a variety of different offerings that offer value out there. Internet marketers also tend to really bake in continuous contact with customers. And so they're not having to kind of, gear up for some big initiative to reach out to customers or prospects. That's just something that's happening automatically and naturally as they're emailing their lists and making offers, and they're paying attention to who responds to which offers, and they're using all of that to get to know their customers better and better. So in short, internet marketers recognize that great products are only part of the equation, and what you really have to have is an efficient, scalable process to go along with any products. And that's what's going to give you a sustainable business.
And this is a point we've really been trying to learn and make part of our business over time. We've looked to folks like John Jantz at Duct Tape Marketing, who has some great perspectives on this, and we'll link to him. And people like Ryan Dice. We have his invisible selling machine sitting on the desk in our office here, and have incorporated some of his methods into how we approach email automation and how we're going to maintain engagement with our list over time. We have a process built into that whole list component of things. So that was number 7. And to recap the rules, we had number 1, which was value first, making sure you're providing value even before you're asking for anything. Number 2 was the money is in the list. So, making sure you're building that list. And even if you have the list, making sure you're tending it and cultivating it and, really continuing to provide value to it in ways that are meaningful to the people who are on the receiving end. Number 3 was teaching sales. So we talked about the power of educational content as a marketing tool and tapping into that resource that, of course, learning businesses are naturally going to have, but aren't necessarily using. Number 4 is testing teaches. And again, this is not a school test. This is testing out your ideas in the marketplace and getting feedback that helps you to decide your strategic direction, your product strategy, just figure out what's going to work. Number 5 was emotion rules. So, trying to really connect with people, not just at a logical, intellectual level, but at an emotional level, because that's where most decisions, including buying decisions, are usually made. Number 6 was words matter. So being able to write great, compelling copy that gets attention and then leads people to converting, to actually, signing up, purchasing, whatever it is that you want them to do. And then finally, no process, no business. You really need to be able to take all of this and get it into a process, or you'll drive yourself crazy, frankly. You've got to be able to repeat this, automate it, really make it kind of a machine. Ryan Dice uses the words invisible selling machine for a reason. And it's a lesson definitely to take to heart.
So you just recapped those 7 rules, Jeff, and those are what successful internet marketers do, but it's really important to note that they follow them consciously, that they tend to be very clear about their overall strategy and very deliberate in how they proceed with executing on that strategy. And so the important thing to note is that strategy is the context that makes these rules work for you.
Definitely, amen. And again, we'll link to a number of resources, including Ryan Dice, Jeff Walker, Brendan Bouchard, some of the internet marketers we mentioned at the beginning, and then some of the resources that we mentioned along the way in throughout this episode, so that hopefully you can take all of this and incorporate it into your strategy.
So to get access to those links and to show notes, go to leadinglearning.com/episode 109. You will also find there a link to the 10 realistic, cost-effective ways to grow and improve your learning business that we mentioned at the outset of this episode.
And while you're there, you will also see the various options for subscribing to the podcast. And if you're getting value out of Leading Learning, we would be truly grateful if you would subscribe.
We would also be grateful if you would take just a minute to give us a rating on iTunes. You can do that by going to leadinglearning.com/iTunes. We really appreciate that, and it helps others to find the podcast.
Finally, consider telling others about the podcast. You can send out a tweet simply by going to leadinglearning.com/share, or if tweeting isn't your thing, just pick another social network of your preference and reach out to the world that way.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.